With the second wave coming, did you download the COVID-19 reporting app yet? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Bill Whittle Now is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And Bill, as you probably well know, this is a thing. There are a number of apps that are either voluntary apps that you can download to get alerts about COVID-19 positive test results near you, or in the case of places like California or now the UK, and you know that California is always ahead of the UK, they have an official government app where you can self-report your positive test, and then other people who have the app can find out that they were in proximity to someone, not you specifically, because they would never reveal the personal data, but they could know that, you know, I was at the hardware store the other day and somebody there who was in line at the checkout had tested positive. Bill, isn't it a good idea for the people to empower themselves with technology to be able to address something that government seems ill-equipped to handle?
They've got a version of that app coming for people in California that allows you to self-report other people too, and that's
you said self, right?
Yeah, it allows me to report anybody else that I see who's not wearing a mask or who I suspect may be running a temperature. I generally don't go anywhere now without my handy remote thermometer, point my little red dot on people's foreheads, just for the sake of the community, obviously.
So are you running iKaren on an Android or an iPhone?
iKaren. Oh, man, that'd be so good. So I'll just answer that question first, then I'll get to a bigger issue. Look, a private app, right, with data sharing. But yeah, that would be, if this is the kind of thing that concerns you, I could see it be useful, but again, it's victim to the network effect, right? I mean, if one person has this app and I'm looking at where are other apps self-reporting people who are sick. If nobody else has the app is useless. In fact, in the nature of a pandemic, if one person who's infectious doesn't have the app is essentially useless. So it's probably just more feel-goody kind of thing, but at least it's private enterprise and it's individuals, and I'm always in favor of that kind of thing. The thing that I think needs to be that is already criminal and could become catastrophic is the way that certain states and governors, and I'm not going to mention, California and Gavin Newsom by name,
no,
but the way that they have reacted to this initial COVID-19 thing is criminal, and they put lots and lots of businesses out of business. And I got a letter from one of them yesterday, people that I know. This virus, as it has existed so far, has a survival rate of 99.93%, I think, on average. And if you're under 60 with no comorbidities, it's 99.9999%. And so what happens, what I'm saying is in the long term, is that we got a global pandemic and we got a brand new virus that's never existed before that has been extremely benign as far as these things go. If this had been aerosolized Ebola, we'd be having a completely different conversation now. But what concerns me most is that they have misused their powers. They have abused their powers. They've made all of these COVID-19 powers so arbitrary that if it does come back in the fall with a significantly higher lethality, no one's going to listen to them, and no one should listen to them. The reason I'm worried about this is because in 1918, the flu pandemic had a first wave in the spring that was relatively mild, and then in the fall, it came back with a vengeance. And if these tyrants had basically lived up to their promise, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, okay, let's start getting people back to work. If they had done that, then when this thing comes back or when the next one comes back, people would have a reason to trust them. But now nobody has any reason to trust them whatsoever. And it's if this thing rebounds with a higher mortality rate, then we will have no one to blame but our government officials for having misused their power when they could have used it as a drill or an exercise.
I'm reading a story from theconversation.com with a gentleman named Joshua Gans wrote this, and he downloaded the official COVID alert app. And it seems to me that he lives in California, but he doesn't make that immediately clear. But it's interesting.
He lives in California.
He says in its first month, there were only 2.2 million downloads, of the app. and 90 infections. What you point out about the crowdsourcing of that data, it only works if people are actually reporting the data. Apple and Google have apparently collaborated on an alert app, but the alert app is part of the operating system on the phone. It does not gather information, it just reports information. In order to actually put the information into that database, you have to download an app so you can, again, self-report. What are the odds that people want? It's not that their data is not anonymized, but can you imagine people downloading and say, oh, I just got the virus, I better let the rest of the country know about that?
Well, there is that one small flaw in the theory. During the dot-com boom, I worked for a company called is.com, and this was when everybody was dot-com crazy. And it was an online retailer. And we did a TV show, kind of a really hip TV show. We used the products in the TV show in these little, in these little segments. And the idea would be people would see this cool stuff, then they'd come to is.com, and then they'd buy the stuff. And the guy who was the internet genius behind this, the big brains, said, well, our millions, thousands and thousands of people are watching the show and they're coming to the website, but nobody's buying anything. I said, well, our products cost more money than they would if they bought it in a store. They don't get to try the clothes on or anything. And this guy just plain stopped and stared at me for, honestly, 30 seconds like, oh, I never really thought of that. Our products are more expensive and they're less easy to deal with, and we provide no feedback.
Clean out your desk, Whittle.
That might have something to do with it. And so that was a great example to me on how astonishingly easy it is sometimes for people, especially intellectuals, to come up with something that is extremely complex, a beautiful little train set that works just great, and all the little gears, and the gates go up and everything, and they don't even realize the fundamental thing, like who's going to self-report this? Right? It's Super Karen would self-report this.
So there are a couple of ways that you can approach this then, Bill. You can find inducements to self-report, and it's the internet. These are apps. And so I was just kind of brainstorming here in my little storm area. What if there were rewards for downloading or using the app? What if you gamified it? If you had a game called COVID-19 Minefield, and you, by reporting this information, you got points and avatars and icons and fake coins and maybe real coins?
COVID Crush. Have little tiny little animated viruses, and you shoot them and they explode every time you report yourself or something. Yeah, it'd be as effective as anything else that they're talking about doing. It'd be as effective as the water pistol emoji, replacing the pistol emoji in the iPhone many years ago, which has cut the murder rate enormously in this country, obviously.
But do you have a problem with that kind of private initiative of saying, hey, we got to find a way to get people to self-report? It's kind of like how Facebook gets people to stay on Facebook. Let's find ways to incentivize them to do something that allows us to continue to monetize their activity, or in this case, to crowdsource their viral data. 99%
of the time when the sentence starts, do you have any problem with this private initiative? The answer is no. And the reason for this is really simple. This is probably something else that we should just be clear about. The reason that there's hardly, in fact, I can barely imagine a private app, a private business, any kind of private enterprise. The reason that I say, no, it doesn't bother me no matter, before I even hear it, is because if it is a private thing, if it's an app developed by a company or something, and the reason I have so much confidence in these things is because there's no coercion involved. In other words, as an adult, I get to look at this product, I get to decide whether I want to buy it or not. So anytime that somebody says, I've got this free market idea, I've got this app, I've got this thing for sale, it could be counterproductive, and I would be, well, off you go. It's when the power of the state to coerce people into action, that's when you got to really, really pay close attention. And as much as I've seen of the decay in this country over the last 20, 30 years, as much of the decline and everything we've seen in riots on the streets and all of that stuff, I do have to tell you, one of the things that has given me the most comfort and satisfaction during this 9-month, 2-week period is the response of the average citizen to these report your neighbor hotlines. That makes me proud and happy. Once I did it in New York, people started sending in obscene pictures and fingers and the bird and so on. Garcetti basically said, hey, if you report your neighbors, there'll be a reward for you. And people basically told him to pound sand. And again, this kind of comes to the whole COVID thing, Scott, in terms of how it's being handled. When Garcetti makes these announcements,
Garcetti, mayor of Los Angeles.
Beg your pardon, yes. He makes all of his announcements on this in front of a podium that says "safer at home." And when I heard that for the first time, I thought, "Oh, I'm safer at home." And then I realized if there is not a more perfect social justice version of Big Brother than "safer at home," you're going to have to. It sounds so good, right? You'll be safer at home.
You'd be safer if he was at home.
I'd be safer if he was in federal prison, and Newsom as well. So my main concern is that there will be a rebound in the fall, that this is a pattern that flus have. COVID seems to be relatively stable compared to other forms of the flu. That's good. Hopefully it's not going to mutate into something more lethal. And my understanding is that most times that these viruses mutate, they actually mutate into something less lethal. So maybe 1918 was just a bad lottery draw. But without question, the government's response has not only not inspired public confidence, it has destroyed public confidence, and we're going to pay for that.
So let's take it to the next level now. It's no longer voluntary private enterprise, people signing up and, reading the terms of the agreement and 7 pages of 6-point agate type and then saying, okay. Now, because we're already getting data reported from local healthcare providers into a national database at Johns Hopkins, why not take that to the next step and say, all data of all positive tests must be reported with location data that is anchored to a smartphone so that if you have a positive test through Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, your location is being tracked, still anonymous, but people can see, oh, by the way, there are 6 positive people at the Kroger supermarket right now, so I think I'll stay home until they leave.
Well, again, first of all, for that to be effective, every single person would have to have the app. Every single person would have to self-report. Otherwise,
or it can be built into the operating system.
It doesn't matter. If it's built into the operating system, you still have to self-report. Now, if you're talking about a device that in order to use it, it takes your temperature, records that temperature.
No, I mean the medical care providers report this.
Well, medical care providers are required to report any kind of cases of an epidemic outbreak, and I don't really have a problem with that. Look, we've already lost so many freedoms, and I think for most conservatives out there, the most shocking thing about the last 8 months has been how easy it has been for people, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but including myself, to have just basically complied with all of this stuff. So look, you can solve all of these epidemiology problems by inserting a chip into people. Just put a little incision in their forearm at birth, a little transponder the size of a grain of rice, just put it in there and bury it, sew it up, and it's gone. And it can report your body temperature, it can keep track of your finances for you, it can tell you wherever you are in case you have a heart attack, it can report the heart attack and have emergency vehicles come and all the rest of that stuff. And there's all these benefits that you could get out of it. And if you're willing to do that, then you get what comes to you. Now this thing is the exact same thing as a chip. It's no different whatsoever. The only difference is that I can put this down. I don't, but I could. And so if you're going to go that route, if you're going to go the technology route for avoidance and for accurate reporting of things like epidemics, then you have a choice. You either have something that's minimally effective or you have something that is utterly coercive. And again, we got lucky with the COVID-19 thing. It's not lucky for the 200,000 people who died of it, although 94% of those, or 94% of them had 2.6 other comorbidities. I'm not trying to lessen their loss, but it does put some things into perspective. But the point I'm trying to make is, where is the greater threat? Which is the greater threat to our way of life? Is it a global pandemic, or is it absolute submission to the whim of blow-dried haircuts in Sacramento? And it's clear to me, in the case of COVID-19, that this is a no-brainer. that the damage that has been done to this by the reaction is so much worse than the damage that was done by the virus. And this is the essence of the Hippocratic Oath. This is the wisdom of the Hippocratic Oath. The oath that doctors take goes back to Hippocrates, and it's old. It's more than 100 years old, actually, as it turns out. And the first rule of a doctor, the first rule is first, do no harm. Don't make it worse. And the harm that's been done in the response to this in the name of medicine is something that a lot of people should be embarrassed over. And I think that we have all learned a lesson about this. And I think the lesson that we've learned is that the American people are by far, and this is, count me completely surprised to say this, that 320 million people are far, far, far more intelligent and far better able to deal with what is a reasonable amount of safety than one or two blow-dried cretins who got their job because their aunt happened to be a rocket sled facelift proponent who's ruined San Francisco, ruined California, and is trying to ruin the rest of the United States. The individual response of the American people, in my mind, to a very large degree, and the percentage of Karens in our population is exceedingly small compared to other populations. And furthermore, they're being mocked, and that's a good sign too. So I think the American people are much better able to assess risk. And if they saw something that was really serious, kind of thing where people are pulling over in their cars and basically, puking up blood and then just, bleeding out on the street, we would respond to that very differently than the way we respond to this. And I think, and I hope the lesson for this is that when this horse comes around the lap again, and it's going to someday, that we as citizens will be better prepared, even though I suspect the governments won't be, and they will try to reimpose this. I know I'm going on and on. Here's my concern, Scott. My concern is this. Once you put in a Homeland Security color-coded warning system, right? Red, orange, yellow, green. Once you put that in, the card will never, ever be green. Ever. It will never be green. Once you put that in there, it will vary between red, orange, and occasionally yellow, but it will never, ever, ever be green. And this is what alarms me about this. There is no metric whatsoever for this. If Gavin Newsom were to come out and say, we will reopen this state when the number of new reported cases comes to 6 a day, whatever the number is, there'd be a metric, but there is no metric. It's at his whim. He pulls out his perfumed handkerchief and waves it, and things happen. So we learned a lot from this pandemic, and if it gets worse in the fall, I think we will deal with this as individuals and put an awful lot less faith in the government that let us down so badly.
The members of BillWhittle.com have made this program possible, along with more than 40 shows every month, brand new content in addition to many, many posts on the member written blog. You can join them, get to know these liberty lovers, participate in their content creation machine at BillWhittle.com by clicking that big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.